Welcome to Do Your Dailies, the podcast designed to help you on your journey of addiction recovery. We're going to go through the big book of AA and use our collective experience, strength, and hope to help you understand what addiction recovery really looks like. So grab some snacks, sit back, press play, and dig deep. Thanks for being here. Hey there, and welcome to this episode of the Do Your Dailies podcast. We are so glad you're joining us. We hope that at this point you are just loving that deep dive that you're doing into your own soul, into your own journey along this path. My name is Chris, I'm your host, and I am joined by my friends Dave and Joe. Gentlemen, how's the day?
It's wonderful, Chris. Thanks so much for having us today, and looking forward to jumping into kind of where we're at in chapter 2, because we're about to do an even deeper dive.
Well, Joe's good. I'm Dave, and I'm all fuzzed up. I love this stuff. We've been talking. Been a lot of stuff happen. Good things. It's amazing when you ask in prayer for things, some of the things that happen. So I'm looking forward to this as well. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. And what Dave's referencing is prior to us hitting record, we've spent some time chatting amongst ourselves about all things recovery and pain and the journey and successes and struggles. And we want you to know that you're not alone in this. We aren't speaking at you. We aren't telling you what to do. We are asking guidance. We are asking to be led in our own path as well. And so, again, thanks for being here with us.
I might add, Chris, I would just invite you, the listener, as you go through this and ponder these things and apply them to your own lives, just remember that the magic of this is sharing it and passing it on. You are currently building into and working into a person that will help another. And that may sound a bit preemptive early on, but I'm just telling you what happens. And no matter where you are in the continuum, you may know a little bit more than someone else who's brand new, and they may ask you. And so you can refer back to and talk about your experience. That's what's so critical here. And so, again, we're talking about the big book, which is a collection of experiences, and particularly those that wrote it. But I'll just put a word in of gratitude that it's here, that we can read it, and then we can read it to you, and you can take your experience and then pass it on to another. And that's where the real juice comes in. So,
yeah, thank you. So we're going to pick back up on page 23 of the big book. And Joe, you want to start reading there?
Absolutely. This for me is kind of where a lot of the meat and potatoes really start like showing up. So starting in the first paragraph on page 23. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body.
Now hold on.
Now, for me, oh my gosh, we
got to stop there.
Talk about just having something explode, because a lot of people just read this, but they don't understand the significance of what we just covered. Okay, this is literally a very key in the lock situation where literally, if you turn it, things will start showing up. So in that last sentence where it says, therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body, it's like we could read that and just gloss over it. But what it's telling us is it's telling us that we have one main problem, okay, that we need to understand. And that problem is the way that the mind of the alcoholic works. Okay, now we've been talking about this, and the doctor's opinion covers it briefly, but not as profoundly as what he's just actually said to us right here. We're actually finally given the light that the main problem of what the alcoholic is really wrestling with is we're finally being told that we are wrestling with the mental obsession for alcohol, and that this is more of a problem then the allergy of the body, that's a manifestation of a phenomenon of craving beyond our mental control. So what we're being invited to actually do is to take a different perspective of the main issues involved in what we see as the disease of alcoholism, and like really start to understand that the one thing that we are being invited to look at, and the one thing that therefore we need to make a conclusion of, is like, what does it mean then to work on this main problem? And how do we like really functionally come to terms with what that means? Okay. And it doesn't automatically start here to help us actually start understanding it. It's opening the light and saying, okay, men and women, we're now inviting you to take a look at this significant issue, because if you don't see that this is the main problem, we're going to still struggle.
Well, and I might add, just before Joe read what he did, the sentence before, it says, we're equally positive that once he takes any alcohol into his system, something happens, and it makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. What I would like to point out, yes, they're talking about the allergy, but the obsession of the mind that Joe's referring to never stops. It's not just at the beginning when it starts to tell us a drink would be good. A drink would be good. Mm-hmm. It continues. So now I have a drink. Why can't I quit? Well, I have two functions, two forces working against me. One, the allergy. I can't get enough. But my mind is also still working. Hey, it's just one. What's a few beers? Just stick around. Don't worry about what happened last week or last night. The obsession of the mind continues to operate in full force all the way through, up to and including when you wake up the next morning or 3 days later. It wasn't that bad. It's remarkable how the obsession, how clever it is, and how forceful it is, and how convincing that it is. And so that's why it's so critical that we understand it. And then later we'll talk about what do we do to fight against this obsession. We're not there yet. We'll keep reading.
So this just becomes a real critical point in the evolution of the understanding of what the big book is inviting us to understand. And I'm inviting you to also take the time to also look at it in a perspective that is a game changer. Because rarely do we actually come across something that is just that plain. Okay. If you ask him why he started on the last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having had a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of the alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. You know, now that goes back to again, you know, what we're also talking about too is, I don't believe everybody can just read that and fully understand it. You really need to do a deeper dive into, like, what does it mean to have the problem of the allergy of the body, the obsession of the mind, and how does that influence this thing called recovery, abstinence, and also relapse? And part of what we just read over kind of gives us kind of an understanding that the difficulty is like wrestling with these concepts and like not understanding it and like being, I don't understand, because that's part of the problem that alcoholics and addicts are facing is they're part of that, giving all this fallacious reasoning and expounding on kind of why they did this and why they did this, but it doesn't ever make sense. And it most likely doesn't make sense to them, but they're doing the best they can to cover up, hide, and continue that relationship with drugs and alcohol without truly understanding that what they're wrestling with is something that is so far beyond their scope and their pale of understanding that they can't overcome that. They're still trying to wrestle with that idea that they've got control and everything's okay. So...
And I agree with you, and I look at it this way. If you ask him why he started, he doesn't have a clue, but he will offer any of 100 alibis. Now, that's important. Yeah. That shows the creativity of the obsession of the mind. I will just keep shooting alibis to you until what happens? If you're the recipient of all the alibis, at some point you just shake your head and say, I'm done talking, and you turn and leave. whether that be a spouse or whoever. At that point, the alcoholic has won. All he was trying to do was get the bullseye off of his chest.
In that moment. Because there's not the, what about tomorrow? That doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. I just don't want to feel the heat score right now, so I'm going to just keep. And I've been there. I mean, I've had a person look at me and say, do you really believe that I'm believing what you're saying right now?
Yeah.
Well, what went through my mind is, well, I've got to get honest. I got to quadruple down. This has got to be even more convincing. So, you flap your arms, you get mad. We'll use anything that we possibly can, along with these alibis, to get that focus off of me.
Right.
And again, that's just, that is the obsession of the mind. There it is at work after this event.
Immediately after.
Yeah.
It doesn't wait. So the mind's always going with this stuff.
My alcoholic mind never rests. It does not need a break. It doesn't call a timeout. So what I would invite you to do right now, if this applies, is sit down with a piece of paper and a pen and just start to write down some of your alibis, some of your reasoning. How has your creative side come out and manifested itself? And the reason that's so important is because if I've used it once, I've got it cataloged in my mind. I can use that again. Now I might have to add more flair. I might have to add more volume. I need to, get bigger, but that worked. And we remember that. So a recovery skill is getting to the truth about how the obsession of my mind has worked. I'm not talking about anyone else's. What have I said? What have I done to prove that what you're asking me was not true? Because that's where we're just trying to get the heat off me. So it's important to note what each of us has done. And that's one of the things that I've worked on with many people. What's the truth about what your brain has told you? You need to identify it so then I can take action against it as it starts to crop up the next time.
Okay. Continuing. Once in a while, he may tell the truth. And the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied, part of the time. But in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, he will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count. Now, again, we just covered another aspect of the disease that we really haven't talked that prudently about, okay? So when we talk about once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. The malady that we are referring to here is a spiritual malady that's spoken of later on in another chapter that we haven't addressed yet. And then it continues from there, and then it gets us back into the obsession. And that's really a great definition of what we're talking about. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, meaning that they have control. That's literally what the obsession really dials into the mind and the heart of the alcoholic, is that they have a sense that if they just can just take one more and they can moderate it and they'll have control and it's not going to be a problem anymore. That's the obsession. It literally drives everything behind this whole mess. And then from there, but they often suspect that they are down for the count. In other words, when I was drinking, I already knew I had a problem. I just was completely unwilling to talk about it. And that's literally one of the things that will gain us freedom if we learn how to speak the truth of what's going on. The difficulty is that for most men and women that are dealing with this issue, their mind is just so consumed with this idea of power and control and hiding and continuing the process of someday, somehow, I'm going to be able to control and enjoy this process of drinking, that it's not going to be a problem tomorrow.
I think that's a genuine hope. I think there's a genuine desire for that to be the case for most people. And I think about the shame that comes in when we struggle. When we get to a point where like, oh I know what to do. I know how to keep myself safe and healthy and all those kinds of things, but I did it again. So here's that shame base. And then in this last paragraph that you read, the question, why? Mm-hmm. And how many times, maybe to the listener and viewer, ask yourself, how many times have you been asked why? Why'd you do it? And maybe some of our viewers and listeners aren't the addict or alcoholic, but the loved one. So I'm going to invite you as well to take a step back and evaluate how many times has that been the first inquiry coming out of your mouth in that anger, that frustration. Why'd you do it? Why did it happen again? And in that paragraph, right there in the middle, page 23. The truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. The why is one of the ultimate questions, and right above that, there's 100 different things, 100 different reasons. It's sunny today, or it's rainy today. It's snowy, or it's hot. I'm succeeding. I'm failing.
Anything will do. Yeah. I think there's a very important principle here in these two sentences at the end. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, he will beat the game. Now, why did he say somehow, someday? Why did he put that in there? I think the reason he put that in there is because that's how we think. By some miraculous osmotic process, it's a Thursday and there was a meteor shower last night. But what he's saying is, then he says, but they often suspect they are down for the count. So somehow, some way, but the truth is I'm down for the count. And the reason that's so important is because at that point in my drinking, I don't have any evidence that I can put it down. Mm-hmm. I've never been able to do it before. So what I count on is the obsession of my mind coming up with 100 alibis. Yeah. All I'm hoping for is just to get the focus off me, to really stop, because deep down we've asked ourselves many times, why can't I drink like I used to? And why can't I stop when I start? And at this point, he points this out very, very clearly. There's the obsession, not only the obsession to the drink, but there's juxtaposed right next to it is the obsession that I can quit somehow, some way. Yeah. But there's nothing behind that. There's no strategy. There's no, and I use the word hope very carefully. There's no hope, because behind hope, if there's not a step-by-step strategy, that's not going to come into play. So yes, there's obsession that maybe somehow, but for today, I'm down for the count. In other words, I'm still drinking and I don't know why. And there is and I just would like to also point out the other angle on this. That's the obsession of the mind at full value. Somehow, someday, Dave, we'll get this taken care of. We're not sure today, but don't worry, it's coming. Do you see the craftiness and the cleverness in the obsession of the alcoholic mind? It takes no prisoners.
None whatsoever.
Any and all strategies. Because I can say, well, yes, I'll stop tomorrow, but today I can have this one, which then turns into 50 and tomorrow never comes. And so, well, I can take one. But again, I just want to point out the cleverness of the obsession of the mind. And until we understand that and hit it straight on, it will continue to play out in this way. That's a very powerful piece of information for us.
Well, what's interesting to me is kind of what we're about to read related to family and loved ones. How true this is. If you realize, in a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. Again, what's fascinating about this is we're being invited to understand that the mind of family members is also, they're not seeing this as a disease. They're just waiting for the person to wake up one day, everything's fine, and they've asserted their power of will, and we're now going to be in smooth sailing. It's this is part of also why we talk about alcoholism as also being a family disease, because there's multi-generational issues that are still creeping up involved in this that do have a lot to do with this concept of I've got a power of will to just say, I'm going to stop. And family members are just praying and hoping that it'll happen one day. But without family members understanding this, without the addict and alcoholic understanding what we're going through, there is not going to be a happy day that's going to show up. There needs to be an understanding of this, and then the application of like, how do we solve this?
Yeah, I'm thinking just about that again, sincere. It's a sincere desire. I hope he gets it. I hope she wakes up. I hope, and so any sign of that life, any sign of that, okay, they're doing well right now. They're doing well. They're doing well. Things are going good. Things are going really good. But it might have been all of 3 days. And it's not enough. I wish it was enough, but it's not enough. We have to sustain that change. Well, our episode is a little shorter today. And Dave, I'd love if you'd reiterate that challenge that you gave a few moments ago to the listeners. And we're going to ask that you not jump to the next episode, but really take a step back and dig into that. Do you recall?
If you want some funny material, again, take a pad of paper and to the best of your ability, go back and write down the excuses, the alibis that you have offered. And after we go back and look at, because I did that. I'm not asking you to do anything I haven't done. And even I was astounded at what I had told people.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would even call them and say, did I tell you, what do you remember? And they'd just shake their head. And they say, the saddest part of this whole thing, Dave, is you were absolutely convinced that I was buying the whole lot of it, that I believed any word. He said, do you know, this is an old cliche, but, when am I lying?
When your mouth's moving.
When my mouth is moving. And back then it was true. But I have to say, and in fairness, I have to say I'm so grateful for that creativity. If we can just take that same passion, that same creativity, and just shift it a little bit to something, worthwhile and wholesome, boy, we can set the world on fire, because there is no end to what we will say. And so just as an exercise, just be honest with yourself and write down what are the stories, what are the facts about what you said, what was the truth about what you said, to cover up whatever it was. And go back and dig for a little bit and think about that if you can remember. Some of it I couldn't remember, but if you want a real humorous ride, write down your own story, the alibis, and then read it to somebody. Get a good hearty laugh out of it, because it's true. And some of it, in fairness, some of it might be tragic. And I understand that. Some of it might be very, very sad. But the truth of it on paper is a very valuable exercise. So that's what I challenge you to do.
Gentlemen, thank you. I feel enriched, and you all listening and watching are thinking, what are you talking about? This is a 25 minute episode. We spent a significant chunk of time and energy and emotion chatting before we hit record. And I so value you guys and value you, listeners and viewers. We're in this together. We have a strong desire to heal collectively. And we ask that you'll share this message. It'll come across as selfish. Share this message. Spread that word. But we're practicing these principles. We know they work. And we believe that if you practice them, if you implement them consistently, your life is going to change. And we believe firmly that it will change the lives of those that you share this with, if they follow. Have a great rest of your day. Be well. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Do Your Dailies Big Book podcast. If you like what you hear and you want more, please like and subscribe and share this show with your friends, with your clients, with your sponsees. That's the best way to support us bringing you more recovery content. You can follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and X at Do Your Dailies. This podcast is sponsored by Hobble Creek Health and is edited and produced by Nielsen Digital.